All right, well, thank you so much for having me, everyone. Thank you. I hear it's just week 2 of classes, so I'm sure you're all just kind of getting into the roll of things. And before we go any further, yes, there are brownies at the end. We're a bakery. No one leaves the building or goes to a presentation without eating a brownie, so don't worry. There will be brownies. So I'll start with this. This is our motto, and this is really our philosophy at the end of the day. We don't hire people to bake brownies. We bake brownies to hire people. Greyston is all about providing opportunity for economic advancement for folks who have been traditionally denied from employment. So that's ranging from anybody who doesn't have job experience, who has English as a second language, who's an immigrant, somebody with criminal convictions in their history. We really kind of run the gamut in the obstacles you surpass with our hiring model. So it's called Open Hiring at Greyston. I'll get a little bit more into how that came about and where we ended up, where we are today. But this is really what it all boils down to for us at the end of the day. Just going to cover a little bit what I'm going to get through today, a little bit about Yonkers, so you get a little bit of the context of where Greyston is, some of our history, our mission, our values. We'll definitely dive into our relationship with Ben & Jerry's, as that's a critical part of our success and kind of where we're going. And then we'll talk a lot about how open hiring works and what's next for us. So a bit about Yonkers. Has anyone seen Show Me a Hero on HBO? Oh, we only got one. So Yonkers is a very interesting place. For those who don't know, it's situated just outside of New York City. We're just north of the Bronx. Yonkers actually did vote on joining New York City as a 6th borough decades ago in its past, but actually unanimously turned that down and remained their own city. But Yonkers is the 4th largest city in New York State, which a lot of people don't realize. Actually a pretty significant city up in Westchester. And it has a very interesting history. So Yonkers really started to boom when it became a manufacturing hub. A lot of big manufacturers like Otis Elevator came out of Yonkers. FM radio came out of Yonkers. A lot of different inventions you wouldn't think of actually stemmed from this city, and that's really how Yonkers started to boom. But as we've all seen with the history of how manufacturing has gone in this country, inevitably that boom fades. They find lower costs elsewhere. They moved out. And that really sent Yonkers down a different path. In many ways, it transformed into a real suburban hub. There was a huge white population. I think it was about a 98% versus 2% minority decades ago. And that has changed significantly over time, but created its own problems. For those who don't know, what Show Me a Hero was really about is an ongoing housing and education lawsuit that Yonkers was engaged with the federal government, with HUD, because of institutional practices that were exasperating poverty and that were really racially driven. So where we are in Yonkers is right here in Southwest Yonkers, is where the bakery is situated. And 1/3 of folks who live in this area of Yonkers live below the poverty line. Which is a significant increase, not only against the rest of Westchester, but against the rest of the nation. It's a really concentrated level of poverty where we are. So that's a little bit about our context and why Greyston makes sense where we are today. So Greyston, these are some of our major milestones, but to Shell's point, we're going to talk about our origin story first, because it is really something special. Greyston was founded by a man named Bernie Glassman in 1982, and Bernie was a Zen Buddhist monk who was originally an aerospace engineer. He had quite the life, as you can imagine. And he founded a Zen Buddhist community in Riverdale, which is just south of where we are now in Southwest Yonkers. And the bakery was started initially just to support this Zen Buddhist community. It was just to provide them with a livelihood. So they were making specialty cakes and desserts for restaurants in New York City, and they were doing pretty well. But Bernie started to see very quickly that there was this huge issue of poverty in Southwest Yonkers. He saw a lot of people who couldn't get jobs, a lot of homelessness, and he wanted to do something about it. So really what Bernie just started to do was meet people on the street, ask if you wanted a job. All right, you want to come start at the bakery tomorrow. He just started finding people outside their doors, bringing them in and training them in the job, at the position, so they could find that economic security they were lacking. And that is still essentially how we operate today. So that's what open hiring is. There's no applications, there's no background checks. You come to the door of our bakery, we ask you to sign up on a list, and as soon as there's an opportunity to hire more people, it's first come, first serve. We bring you in, you go through orientation, and you start training on the floor. So it's a little above, like a little step beyond ban the box. We really just ask absolutely no questions. We have no idea really what you're bringing to the table. There's a couple of physical requirements to the job, being able to lift 50 pounds, being able to stand on your feet for a while, but we suss that out pretty quickly in orientation, but that's still really how we operate today. So this is a little of kind of how we've progressed over the years. After being founded, and again, we'll talk a little bit more about this Ben & Jerry's partnership, but this is really what's taken Greyston to the size of the business it is today. In 1989, our founder, Bernie Glassman, was at a conference out in Colorado, and he met Ben of Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream. And they hit it off. Ben said, I make ice cream. Bernie said, I make brownies. He said, let's do something together. And so Bernie shipped up what was supposed to be chocolate wafers up to Vermont for them to mix into some ice cream. It showed up as a huge melted block of chocolate. Like, Greyston did not know how to handle this level of production at that time. But Ben and Jerry were really committed to the relationship. So they really just sat in their lab, chipped away at the chocolate, mixed it into some ice cream. And that's actually how chocolate fudge brownie was born. It was out of the partnership. It wasn't a flavor that they co-opted for us. It was something that started out of the beginnings of our partnership. And that's really propelled the bakery to where it is today. I think we'd still be some tiny bakery located out of Yonkers if it wasn't for the partnership with Ben and Jerry's. In '92, the Greyston Foundation was started. So the Greyston Foundation is our nonprofit arm. And Bernie started this because he saw that just the job was not enough. People needed other support. People needed help with housing. People needed help with childcare. People needed help with mental health issues. And so he started the foundation to create these add-on services. Today that's transformed into a number of programs. We have an early learning center that serves children from 6 weeks to 5 years old. My own son attends there. He's just about to turn 2. We have a workforce development site that serves the community with a number of different certifications for people to find jobs. We have supportive housing for folks with HIV, mental health diagnoses, substance use issues, and a series of community gardens over Yonkers that we use to both educate the community around healthy eating and allow people to create their own produce and fulfill their own needs for healthy food. In 2004, we opened the bakery that we are in now in Southwest Yonkers, which is a 21,000 square foot facility, which is not big. I don't know how many of you visited manufacturing sites or kind of dabbled in that or interested in that, but we're a pretty small facility for the amount of business that we do. And after 2004, you know, the business has only expanded with Ben & Jerry's, and again, I'll get into this a little bit more later, but we've been filling up that capacity in the years since. We became a certified B Corporation in 2015. How many of you are familiar with B Corp and Benefit Corporation and the differences? Okay, so we're part of B Corp, so we go through the audits and all of that, but we also registered in New York State as the first certified benefit corporation, changing our bylaws to guarantee that it was a legal obligation for Greyston throughout the years to pursue that triple bottom line. One of our highlights in the last couple of years, in 2016, we were invited by President Barack Obama and his team to the White House to participate in the launch of the Fair Chance Hiring Pledge. And this is something that's only been gaining steam in the years since, which is exciting to see. But it's a coalition of businesses trying to come together to encourage other large companies to open up their hiring practices, give more people an opportunity. So what is open hiring? We'll talk a little bit more about what does open hiring mean. So again, open hiring is hiring without judging, without asking any questions. One of the Zen Buddhist principles that Bernie left with us and that's still on the walls is this idea of not knowing. So it's this idea that you come to someone, you meet anybody you meet, you don't know what they're about, you don't know what their story is, you don't know where they're headed, you don't know what their goals are. You come in with an open mind, not knowing, and believing that anybody has the power to transform their own life. So that's really the philosophy and the Zen Buddhist kind of nugget underneath open hiring. Around the job, we were kind of building these support services around the bakers to really help them find that self-sufficiency. And so some of that is workforce development. It's helping people build the skills to not only succeed at the bakery, but to be able to move on to other forms of employment. It's benefits and services, which we do through partnership with an agency called Westchester Jewish Community Services in Yonkers. And through that agency and the partnership we have with them, we can provide people access to therapy for anger management issues. We can provide them to housing assistance if they need to find an apartment and to furnish it. If they need help finding childcare that works for them, that can all kind of happen through this partnership with this agency. And then finally, it's building this healthy, sustainable community. So it's trying to transform Yonkers as a whole. And that's what we're kind of trying to do through the whole suite of services that we offer. The Mandala, this is kind of how we refer to our whole organization, so the nonprofit and the business together. So the bakery is a for-profit business that's owned by the nonprofit arm. And so together all those services is what we call the Mandala. So that's that Sanskrit word meaning circle. That's what we are. We're all connected into this ecosystem of parts. Here's our mission, is to really create those thriving communities through the practice and promotion of open hiring. So with that at our core, how do we spin off all the services around it to transform the community that we're a part of? And our vision going forward is to really see how many more businesses, how many more governments or organizations can we engage that could be interested in and enticed into changing their hiring practices. I think we know at Greyston, our impact with jobs can only be so much, right? There's only going to be so much volume in the next few years. And maybe we open another site if we do really well, but the real impact can come when you get more and more players interested in a new hiring model. So this is a little bit more about the bakery. So this is our facility. We actually have a really beautiful waterfront view down in Yonkers. We're right on the Hudson River. So we're going to lose in a few years because they're putting up 9 high-rises right along the water. We have 2 bakery lines within our facility. So we call one our large bakery line. It's basically a large U, and that's where we make solely product for Ben & Jerry's and Unilever. For those who don't know, Ben & Jerry's has been owned by Unilever since 2000, which is an interesting arrangement. So we work with kind of Unilever and Ben & Jerry's entities. We produce roughly 35,000 pounds of brownies per day on that line. And we run through the first half of the year, we're running generally 6 days a week, 24 hours a day. We support Ben & Jerry's business globally, so we ship not only for their plants in Vermont, but we ship overseas to Europe as well. So if you're traveling really anywhere in the world and you eat a pint of these ice creams, that's our brownies. The other oven that we have, the other bakery line we have in our facility, we refer to as our artisanal bakery, and it gives us a little more freedom to make kind of a home-baked feel type of product. So the brownies you're going to eat later today, that comes off those lines. We sell those at Whole Foods primarily. We also sell online and are exploring some other retailers. But that bakery gives us a lot of opportunity to try different things. We've run a number of different products in there, brownie crisp products, the brownies we run now. We've run cookies in there as well. So that bakery line gives us some options to play around with different things. The certifications are probably not super interesting to you guys, but I will say being an SQF Level 3 facility is a globally recognized safety certificate in food manufacturing. And for Greyston, it was a huge step to achieve that. We had our first certification that we passed 3 years ago. And it was a huge coup for the bakery, I think, particularly with the workforce we bring on. We're always interested in demonstrating to anybody who would ask that we can perform at the level that anybody can anywhere in the world. And it doesn't matter that we brought in a workforce that we didn't know anything about before they started with us. So Ben & Jerry's. Production at this point exceeds about 7 million pounds of brownies per year. They're doing pretty well. And I think year over year the growth has been really, really substantial. I think even in my 4 years there, it's been a huge uptick in growth. I think for any who've tried the non-dairy pints, that's one of their biggest new items, and they're constantly expanding that line, but we're also in the non-dairy, so we make a vegan brownie. If there's any vegans in the room, I did bring some of our vegan brownies. So we have that. And Unilever, so I'll say a little bit more about this. The partnership with Ben & Jerry's and Unilever is a very interesting one, and I think as you guys are thinking about social innovation design, I think partnerships are so critical to how we operate and how we succeed. I think what I saw when I started at Greyston was such a non-traditional relationship between a supplier and a customer. So I started my career in manufacturing working at Gateway Computers, and I was a buyer for them. And you learned quickly the customer's always right, we're just going to trade information, get your price right, get your timing right, we'll be fine. With Ben & Jerry's and Unilever, it's a completely different relationship. We're engaged on a number of different levels, from working on production and quality projects together, to marketing together, to thinking about activism together, to thinking about expanding values-led hiring together. The relationship is incredibly enmeshed and empowering on both ends. I think both companies are always looking to push the other one further, to promote the other one. It is an incredibly supportive and collaborative relationship. With Unilever, when I first started, I think they were more skeptical. Unilever, being the global conglomerate that they are, did come at it as a little bit more of dollars and cents. Like, yeah, we like you guys, but can you take a penny off the price? So they had that mindset much more than Ben & Jerry's did. But as the relationship has progressed, Unilever talks about Greyston almost the same way Ben & Jerry's does at this point. They hold us up as a values-led supplier within their chain. They talk about the hiring model. They want to adopt some of the hiring model in their manufacturing facilities. And so it's really amazing to see how the power of this partnership has not only driven Greyston forward to greater business success, but has also pushed Unilever and Ben & Jerry's further in their expression of progressive values. As one example of this, we've done an employee swap with Ben & Jerry's now for the last 2 years. And what this entails is, for a week, we have a team come down from Ben & Jerry's and they work on the floor at our bakery. They fill in positions on the shift just like anybody else. They go through orientation. They work all day. We take them around to the rest of our programs. They get to volunteer at our learning center and work in our community gardens and kind of get a whole immersion experience into what Greyston means. And then the week right after, we send a team up from Greyston and we go work on the line at Ben & Jerry's and we go make ice cream with them, and we learn about their volunteering activities and their culture. And it's been this incredible kind of experience of cross-company exchange over the last couple of years. Been really privileged to attend both years. And it's amazing to see not only the Ben & Jerry's employees' experience of Yonkers, because I think, for any of you, has anyone done the Ben & Jerry's tour up at Waterbury by any chance? A few of you? So that part of Vermont, when you get up to where Waterbury is, and when you get up to St. Albans, which is really only half an hour from the Canadian border, it is really rural Vermont up there. It's a very homogenous town. The demographics are incredibly different than what we have in Yonkers. Their experience of what poverty means or what struggle means is different than what we see in Yonkers. So it's been incredible to see their teams come to Greyston, come to Yonkers, see the city, and really start to understand at a visceral level, like, what does open hiring mean? What does this relationship that these companies have forged for all these years really mean? And they get to see the impact and take that back with them. And then I think for our bakers going up to Vermont, this last year when we went, one of our bakers, Michael, had never left the state, had never left the city. He hadn't traveled anywhere. And so Vermont was an entirely new experience for him. And the farms and the cows and the whole nine was just kind of revolutionary. And it was a great moment for him to kind of expand what he'd seen and see something new that he hadn't seen before, and just have an incredible reception there at Ben & Jerry's and see what he was capable of. And it's been really an amazing experience. I think what's been really exciting about it, and I mentioned this briefly earlier, is the employee swap's been a driving factor in Ben & Jerry's being motivated to take on open hiring themselves. So this last year they initiated values-led hiring at Ben & Jerry's, and they brought on their first 3 employees who came from a past with criminal convictions, and they've started to implement very similar hiring practices up there. It's been really amazing to see that impact spread. So how does open hiring work? The whole nitty-gritty, and this is my fun flow chart on how open hiring happens. I'll preface by saying this: the bakery is still a business. So there is this deep heart and this core to what we do of we're here to support people, we're here to give people opportunities. We're still a business. We still have to meet quality standards, we still have to meet our orders on time, we still have to keep our waste down. Managing the balance between those two is one of the most fascinating aspects of my position there. And open hiring is where you really kind of see that come to life, because we bring people in, we want to give you a chance, but we're also going to try to bring you through some rigorous training and evaluation to make sure you're up to speed and you can handle the job on the floor. So you start the apprentice program, you start working, immediately. You're working 2 days, 3 days after you've gone through your orientation. And orientation really gives you an overview on safety, on quality, all the good nitty-gritty procedures you need to be aware of on the floor. During your apprenticeship, it can take anywhere from 6 to 10 months that you're an apprentice. You're being evaluated bi-weekly. There is a time and attendance point system that everybody who works at the bakery is subject to, so you become introduced to that, and we're tracking your attendance. And you begin going through a lot of hard skills training on all the various positions at the bakery. Simultaneously, we start connecting you to our resources. So that case manager I mentioned who works through Westchester Jewish Community Services, they'll start meeting with that person as well. So we try to identify very early, do you have any obstacles? Do you have any issues that are going to prevent you from coming to work on time? For instance, we had a new apprentice who started maybe a month ago. Day 1, she went and saw the case manager and said, I have an anger issue, and I haven't been able to hold jobs before because I have an anger issue. And she's been in therapy now for about a month since she started, already working on that issue, collaborating with HR to try and address that and be successful on the job. If you pass through the apprenticeship, and really time and attendance ends up being the biggest factor, whether somebody makes it or not. It's just, can you get to work on time? And for anybody, if you progress in your careers and get involved in manufacturing, the line doesn't run if not everybody is there to staff the positions. It's pretty much as simple as that. I've seen my supervisors run around screaming a number of times, I only have 9 people on the shift, I only have 6 people on the shift. It's a scramble. Especially when you're running 24-hour production like we are. If you're not there and you're not on time and you're calling out in the last minute, we struggle as a business. If you do pass through that and you become a full-time employee, our employees are unionized. So you're part of a union, you gain all of those benefits as well through the union. And we really see that our retention rates increase once people come on full-time. We tend to lose a lot of our people during the apprenticeship period. Our turnover is really high in that program, and that's kind of the intention. It's to really demonstrate through the apprenticeship, can you handle this job? Can you handle the rigors of it? Can you be on your feet? I'll tell you, it sounds really romantic and wonderful working in a bakery. It is not easy on an industrial bakery line. You know, you're holding 20-pound metal trays, you're moving carts of trays around all day, you're on your feet all day. It's not the easiest job in the world, and the apprenticeship is really designed to introduce you to this is the world of work. You have supervisors you have to answer to, your time and attendance you have to be responsible for, you have to know your position, know your safety goals. It's not easy, and so these are all the ways we try to evaluate and support someone through that process so that you can be successful. Here's a few examples I just want to share with you of how some of that early intervention works for us. I mean, I'll say up front, it's not always successful. We lose a lot of people. This summer alone, we had to let go of a number of people for instances of theft. And it was heartbreaking for a lot of people on the staff. It was people who we'd invested a lot of time and energy in and cared about and wanted to see succeed. At the end of the day, it comes down to the individual coming through the door, if they want to make that change for themselves, if they're ready to make that change for themselves, and are willing to take advantage of the resources that are offered. So for instance, our first case here, we had 2 bakers who came into HR, and we found out they were homeless. They'd been sleeping in a park for a number of weeks. And so they came to our case manager and said, I really need help with housing. They were assisted with housing. They got moved into an apartment. They got a fully furnished apartment. And our case manager hooked them up with new furniture and everything. And they're doing really, really well. That's a huge success story for us. The next one, you have an apprentice who struggled making their shifts, but was very good at everything else. They met with the baker on a number of times. Let's try to work through this. What's the obstacle? What is it? They just could not come to work on time. They could not call in on time. It was a termination. What we do in that case is we do try to connect people to the other services that Greyston offers. So this baker in particular was connected into our workforce development program. And they started working through a resume process, working on interview skills, building a certification. So they're seeking employment now through a new path under the Greyston umbrella. Another one, we had an apprentice come to the bakery who had a language barrier, so she found it hard to find employment. English was her second language, and she was struggling to find somewhere where she could really fit. She's been an incredible employee, and at this point now they took her on for media training. She's been doing marketing opportunities with us, doing interviews, doing videos, and is really thriving there. So we see really a range of outcomes. Again, we do see more people stay around than leave once they make it through the apprenticeship, but we definitely have our challenges in the day-to-day. So what's next for us? I think we're always looking to improve upon this. I think we have a great core and we're proud of what we do at the end of the day, but we know there are ways we can improve upon open hiring. And I think one of those ways is to really build out that transitional job program. So right now it's like you come in, you learn the bakery business, you learn food manufacturing, but we haven't had the bandwidth of the network to really create what are those other skills? What's the other job you want to move on to? Maybe you want to open your own restaurant. Maybe you want to become a corporate executive. Like what is the path you want to be on, and then how do we help you build the skills to get there? So kind of building that customized job support is really the next step for us. And that consists of a number of things. I mean, one, there's some of the hard skills training. There's a specific job or a specific thing you're interested in. But there's also the soft skills training. It's just interviewing. It's communication skills. It's conflict management. We find a lot of times that's the biggest barrier someone has that we're working with. And so that's part of our program that we're building out now. And educational opportunities. I think in today's day and age, and I'm sure many of you have seen this, there's so many free online courses. There's courses at at community colleges you can access for free. There's so many more options to get educated these days that we're trying to get creative about how do we plug people into some of those options that are out there. The Next Steps program was like kind of the natural extension of that, and that's job placement. So really that's where we want to be building relationships with employers in the community, finding those pathways for employment. I think one thing we find is a lot of our folks live very locally. So at the bakery, if any of you ever get the chance to visit, and if you do, please come by. We give tours, so you can check it out. Oh, I press something. What totally lost my train of thought.
You give tours.
We give tours. Well, that's what I was going to say. When you come to the bakery and you meet the folks there, you'll see that people have a lot of personal relationships. We find that folks who come in inevitably know somebody who's already working there. Like, oh, I live down the street from you, or oh, I used to go to school with his cousin, or I used to, like, there's a lot of personal relationships on the floor. It's very much a family environment in that sense, which is really, really interesting. And a lot of his people don't have transportation to go elsewhere either. So finding a job in Yonkers is tough because if you don't have a car, and if you can't get to the subway, Yonkers is not a really easy city to traverse just with public transportation. And so a lot of people find it hard to find other jobs just because of locale. Like it's hard to just get to Ridge Hill that's 10 miles away, or it's hard to get down to the Bronx because you don't have the money for the Metro cards and all of that, all the costs that are involved with that. And so building those local relationships to create the opportunities in the area where these folks live is really important for us moving forward. And then finally, it's that alumni network. I think we've had a lot of people come through Greyston's doors over the years. And we've kept track of a few of them here and there, but it hasn't been a really formalized program to be like, where does everybody go after they leave Greyston? Or how successful are you once you leave Greyston? You know, we really have touch with a few people but not as many as we would like. So we're working on building out a much more formal alumni network to kind of gather those stories, find out where people are going, and to learn from those folks. What can we be doing better? What can we be improving upon? I think I'll starting to get to my close with this. Open hiring is much more than a policy, and we've been having this conversation a lot with Ben & Jerry's over the last year. It's a shift in your culture because you're completely rethinking who you're bringing in and how. You know, you're not looking at an incoming employee necessarily as, okay, I'm expecting you to do A, B, C, D, E, F as of day one. You're looking at a new employee like, I don't really know anything about you. I don't know what skills you bring to the table. I don't know what your history is. I don't know what your baggage is. But we're going to figure this out together and we're going to move forward. Like, I really see open hiring as it's a culture shift. It's not just about a policy. It's not just about a program. It's about rethinking the way we look at people. You know, Dion's story, and it's for some of you, if you want to look at this up online afterwards or go to our website and see some of Dion's videos, Dion's really the face of the company and really speaks about open hiring on a regular basis these days. And for him, it was a complete game changer. You know, Dion was born and raised in Yonkers, grew up watching his mother struggle and she was not able to get by on the many jobs that she was holding down. And he saw that the people who were winning out in the street, the people who were successful out in the street were the men around him he saw selling drugs, the men around him selling guns, whatever it was, that's what he saw. That was the ticket out. And so Dion started drug dealing. And very quickly wound up in prison for about 6 years. And used that time to really rethink, like, where did he want his life to go? What did he want? And when he got out, he knew he wanted a job. He wanted to build a family. He wanted to build a life for himself. And he was applying all over the place and just hearing nothing. I mean, all it was he was checking that criminal conviction box and no one was calling him back. And he was starting to get desperate. You know, he talks about it now, he's like, I guess I just need to go back to what I was doing before because this is not going to work out. And then he got that call from Greyston. And in his time at Greyston, has moved up from a line staff member into a lead position, into a supervisory role. And now he's traveling the country speaking about open hiring and really encouraging other businesses to take this on. I mean, it really is about shifting the way we look at people in our society. It's about giving people that second chance. It's about acknowledging that someone's paid their price or that obstacle is not something that they can manage on their own, and we're going to give them that opportunity. And for us, it's much more than just the job. The profits from Greyston Bakery, you know, outside of what we reinvest into the business to improve our efficiencies and all of that good stuff, goes to fund programs across the Greyston Mandala. So money goes to fund the Early Learning Center, goes to fund workforce development. There's still a mix of traditional grants that we get for those programs, but the profits coming from the bakery really allow us to be a little bit more creative about how we fund those programs. I totally cheated here and stuck in a picture of my son, so that's a little nugget for all of you. Okay, but that's what I have. So I wanted to open it up to you guys for any questions or comments. I'm really curious. I read a little bit about your program. It seems really exciting what you guys are studying and learning. So fire away. Yes?
I'm impressed by the open hiring model. I think it's a kind of unconditional inclusion. It's amazing. But I want to know more about what kind of difficulties you have experienced, especially are there any risks you need to take or consider when you execute the open hiring?
You know, it's interesting, because I think you're right. That's always, I think, I've found the first question we get. Like, okay, what are the risks? Like, do you guys have safety issues on the floor? Like, are you concerned for yourselves leaving the parking lot? I will say, in my time, and everyone I've talked to who work at Greyston, that's not the case. And in my experience in manufacturing, I think what I've found is you really get a similar workforce anywhere you go. I worked with a lot of people when I was at Gateway who did have criminal convictions and just lied about it on an application, and that's how they got the job. But they don't address it the way we do. So I think Greyston comes at it head on, of like, okay, we're going to acknowledge that the barriers coming in, and we're going to do what we can to put the support around it. Whereas other folks are just kind of, they have that population and they're just managing it. It's a pretty bureaucratic, okay, you were late, you were this, you're fired, we'll move on. Greyston's looking at those barriers and is thinking, okay, how can we help? So I really have not seen, we don't have risk issues that are different than anybody else. Yes?
Are there any pathways for promoting people from the bakery or like entry level?
Yeah, so there's been a fair amount of internal promotion. So a lot of folks have moved into our quality assurance department, for instance. They're really working on making sure we're hitting the specifications around our brownies. Believe it or not, it gets very complicated. How much moisture is in that brownie? What's the size of that brownie? What's the texture of that brownie? A lot of people have moved up through that program. A number of our supervisors have come up through open hiring as well. I think it's something we can get better at. I think honestly, when I look at Greyston right now at the management level and above, it's not folks who have come through open hiring. And I think that's something we really want to change, because I would like to see the face of the company reflect that workforce in the years down the line, and we're not quite there yet. Yes.
I just have a comment. So I'm a case manager for our workforce development program.
Oh, very cool.
And so for me, a big challenge is always finding meaningful employment for formerly incarcerated individuals. And so for me, like, this is extremely inspiring and something that I'm going to look to when I'm building partnerships with the company. So, like,
oh, I'm glad. No, and I think that is, especially for our folks with criminal histories, it's so difficult, because the laws regulating that kind of hiring and all the complexities around, and then just the fear and the biases that people hold against somebody with a criminal conviction, it's kind of a daunting set of obstacles to overcome, and it really limits currently the options that are available for folks. Some of the things Greyston tries to do, we really try to partner with some larger national and state level organizations who are trying to move that needle. So for instance, we've been working with the Council for State Governments Justice Center based out of Washington, D.C. And we've been working with them on putting together a national roundtable of businesses, including Johns Hopkins, including Uber, including a few other big names, to really push that conversation and push the visibility around hiring these people, and actually what you're missing out on when you choose not to hire out of this workforce. For instance, I think one of the things the Uber executive said when we were at our last meeting was there's 15,000 jobs open for truckers in the state of Kentucky alone. And they can't fill it, and if you have a criminal conviction, you can't get a CDL. Like, that's it. That's off the board for you. But why? And I think there's some groups out there now asking the question, why? Why should you not be allowed to do it? Is it just too broad of a brush? Should we get more case by case? I think those conversations are happening, but the opportunities are still limited right now. You have a question?
I'm curious how open hiring is applied to your management positions, because you said that it's not necessarily reflected in that workforce.
Yeah, so right now when you are coming in at the management level and above, it's more a traditional interview process. You're putting your application and whatnot. So we're creating those pathways, and we're trying to work on getting better at how do we internally promote people, how do we really clarify what it is that we would want to see from somebody to move up into management. But right now, a lot of that's just been hiring external candidates to come in. And I think that's where we have really room to improve, is building that clear channel for people to move up.
Have you guys taken like a firm perspective on whether your method is to lead by example, or instead to like make concerted efforts at policy and advocacy change, advocacy for policy change? Like, could you just talk about the CDL problem with criminal convictions?
I think it's a bit of both. So I will say one thing that I found interesting in my time at Greyston is, for the amount of business we do and the amount of visibility we have, it is a small team at the end of the day. Like, our office staff running the bakery is maybe 12 people. So we're kind of taking a both-and approach there. Like, one, and like I mentioned with the quality certification before, is leading by example. It's demonstrating through the business and the success of the business that it doesn't matter what workforce you brought in. Like, we're running a successful company that's been in existence for over 30 years and is only growing from strength to strength with this hiring model at the core the entire time. So there is that constant demonstrating through what we do that open hiring works. But more and more in recent years, we're pushing into that activism space, pushing into having the conversation at a larger level and bringing the attention to more folks. So one of the things we're trying to do now, we brought on some new members to our development team, new members to a communications team, to really kind of build out how we tell that story and how we share the impact with more folks. Yes?
It seems like Greyston just happens to be in the business of brownies, but is there something about the product of brownies that you think makes this a successful model? And then do you know of any organizations that have sort of lifted the model and successfully implemented it?
So I'll say with the first one, I don't know if there's anything in particular with brownies that makes it successful. I think what that made me think of is some interesting conversations we've had with Ben & Jerry's about this. So Ben & Jerry's has been committed to kind of growing that portfolio of values-led suppliers. So currently it's Greyston Bakery in Yonkers, and then Rhino Foods is based in Vermont, who makes their cookie dough inclusions, is another one of their values-led suppliers. And they have some really interesting business practices that they utilize. But beyond that, they haven't been so successful finding those vendors. And some of it just boils down to like the success of the product at the end of the day. It does kind of come down to what do the consumers like. Like, in some ways, we're just incredibly lucky that we were doing brownies, and we ended up in 2 of their top 5 flavors now, nationally and globally. Without that, we probably wouldn't be the business we are today. So for instance, they had a story about an apple pie vendor they tried to work with maybe 5 years ago. And they were going to make apple pie pieces and put in a pint, and they tried the pint, and just nobody liked the flavor. And that was kind of the end of it. It was like, well, okay, we'd really like to do this with you, but the pint's not going to sell. So in some ways, it really comes down to a traditional business. Do you have a product that sells? And that's where you can demonstrate the success for the model. In terms of businesses who have adopted it, for us, the big push has really been on Ben & Jerry's and Unilever. I think a few years ago, we were talking to some other businesses and speaking with other folks. But the first question would always come back is, oh, so does Ben & Jerry's do it? I mean, if you've been working with somebody for 30 years, you would expect they're the first ones who are going to do it. And so I think for us now, a lot of the focus has been on helping them kind of get to that place and move the needle with them. And we're seeing so much momentum from their team now. So I think that's where we're really focusing our efforts on seeing the success and building that larger case with Ben & Jerry's and Unilever.
I know you guys are doing a lot for Yonkers in the community through the foundation, but do you ever have to deal with community resistance?
In my experience at Greyston, no. We actually have some really good relationships across the community. So we work a lot with our local YMCA and partner with them on different events. We have pretty good relationships with the city and with a lot of government officials we work with there. I haven't seen a lot of pushback in my time. I think historically in the past, maybe 20, 30 years ago, maybe there were some differences there, but I haven't seen a lot of a push. I do think we could be doing more to push a conversation from our end with the government, city government, about where Yonkers is headed. So for instance, I jokingly referenced like those high rises that are going up earlier, but Yonkers is really rapidly changing, and the mayor is really focused on building up downtown Yonkers in particular and kind of making it attractive, especially to like New York City residents. You can get a quick commute into the city, live on the river. But what does that mean then for the population living there now? Like very slowly you start to see, are people going to get priced out? Like where are the opportunities for jobs? So I think I haven't seen the pushback, but I think we could do more to be pushing out the other way. Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could speak to a little bit like what your marketing looks like, or if you even need to do marketing as far as getting new employees who maybe don't necessarily know that this is an option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we actually don't end up doing a lot of marketing for the hiring list. A lot of it happens through word of mouth. So a lot of local service providers, the local like Social Security agency, the Medicaid agency, they know of us, so they refer a lot of people. A lot of parole officers in the area know about us, so if they get someone new on their roster, they'll refer them to Greyston. So a lot of the list just happens through word of mouth and people knowing somebody else. But I will say with marketing outwards and kind of marketing our brand outwards, it does pose some interesting challenges. I think you'll find anybody working in nonprofits has seen a lot of times people want to see the sob story. People want to see the sad, like, oh, who's crying? Where was like the deep impact? But it's an interesting tension now working at the bakery, and these are your colleagues. Like it's a different relationship. These aren't clients. They're not somebody you're providing a service to. It's people you're working alongside with. And people want to be known for kind of who they are and where they're headed and not what they've done before. So I think it's always an interesting tension with how we do marketing and how we coach people that we're doing interviews with. Like, we don't want to use the terms like ex-felons for everybody who works at the bakery. We want to be way more broad about how we talk about this workforce, because these are real people at the end of the day who want to be seen a certain way out in the world as well. Yes?
I'd love to hear more about your day-to-day and which skills make up the bulk of your work. How do you find the skills that define your work?
My head just like started spinning as you said that. I'm like, oh my God, my day-to-day. What was my day-to-day? My day-to-day at Greyston is very interesting. It's challenging, and it really spans so many different things. So I think for today I had conversations ranging from like a quality discussion with Ben & Jerry's about an improvement project we're working on, to meeting with a nonprofit from Europe who's interested in learning about our model, and so kind of doing a similar presentation to this agency, working on our relationships with external partners and governments on how we push open hiring and fair hiring. I mean, I think the skills that really serve me are being able to adapt to many different audiences and many different groups of people. You know, one of the things I've been working on this last year with our leadership team, as part of our leadership team, is a communications and engagement strategy. And so, you know, technically that wouldn't necessarily be part of my role as an account manager, probably anywhere else, but at Greyston, I do have opportunities to play in a lot of different spaces considering the breadth of what we do. So it's really hard to describe a day-to-day. That's a good question. Yes?
Have you seen any evidence of people coming outside of Yonkers to get opportunities?
Not really. I think we've had 1 or 2 people from Mount Vernon, which is kind of just the next city over, so that's not huge. But I will say whenever there's been a special that's aired about Greyston or a new piece that comes out, we get calls from all over the country asking if there's something similar where they are. So you get calls from everywhere from Alabama to California to Montana to whatever. I had a cousin who had a conviction, he can't find a job, or I have somebody who's really struggling to find a job, they have no experience. Like, so the demand is clearly out there, but mostly people are looking for something close to them as well.
Is there like a train-the-trainer model or some type of replication program that companies or other even business or entrepreneurs that are looking to do this can go through?
Yeah, so that's one thing that's in the pipeline right now, and that our foundation team on the nonprofit side has really been working on, is kind of putting together those tools and those white papers and whatever that is. You can just hand the packet to someone and be like, this is how we do it, and these are the practices you can try to take. So that's something that's a work in progress for us. Yes?
Is there any strategy to make more partnerships? Like there's high risk of just depending on one company?
Yes. Yes.
So what's your plan?
Absolutely. So yeah, so there's been a lot of good energy around how we build out that business like in the coming years. On that small bakery, that artisanal bakery side, we're exploring a lot of different relationships. One of the accounts we landed in last year was Delta. So we started making mini-size brownies for Delta flights internationally. And so for us, like finding those kind of co-packing relationships or those big relationships where you can be the snack supply or the dessert supply for an airlines or a college or a university, that's really where we're trying to move on that side of the business. And then with the inclusions, it's an interesting one. Like we're Ben & Jerry's exclusive brownie supplier, but at the same time for us, it is important to get out there and to be putting our inclusions into other products. And so we're just kind of starting to build that side of the business out and explore kind of what our capacity is and our opportunities for finding some other customers. We have some interesting things in the works, but nothing official yet. Yes? Yeah.
Is there a situation that there's more people outside the company who needs help, and the company inside the environment is enough? You don't need any more.
Yeah, definitely. That's a constant situation for us. So when you sign up on that list at the bakery, right now you can expect to be on the list for 6 months plus waiting for that call. What we try to do for folks when they come in and sign up on the list is offer the other services we have. So okay, if you want to go to workforce development in the meantime, work on something else, feel free. Here's some other contacts we have. You can work on those skills in the meantime. But there is quite a wait list. We've whittled it down in the last couple of years, just getting more efficient with moving through it. But there's always people that are waiting. For us, it's really always a balance of making sure when we're bringing new people in that it's not like a temporary worker situation. I think that's something we are always committed to not doing. So when there's a fluctuation in demand, we'll kind of push ourselves to the limits with existing staffing to get through it until we know we need somebody else and we can keep that person on for a long time. Because the last thing we want to do is call the next 5 people on the list, bring them in, you work for a month and you're laid off. That's not really helping anybody. So for us, it's always that balance of, okay, can we just meet our demand? We're right there where it's comfortable. Okay, then we can bring in the next set of people. Yes?
Where, if at all, could you imagine Greyston Bakery collaborating with designers?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think one thing I was thinking about on the way up is, I think like when I do these presentations and talk about Greyston, we talk a lot about our business model, what our practices are, our impact kind of externally. But I find myself thinking more and more about what is our internal culture? Like what are the systems and the processes and the design we've put in place to make sure when I'm starting new as a supervisor or I'm starting new as management, maybe just have an inkling of an idea of what this model's about. How do we bring those people in? How do we really engage people in the values and kind of create people who are fully on board when they come to work at Greyston? And how do we just stay live with our values, kind of stay on the same page? I think we do a decent job, but I don't know. I think that internal part of the business is almost where I think more we could use some intentional design around how do we collaborate effectively around this values-driven model. Anything else? Are you guys just ready for brownies? Oh, there's
If you do any like background check for day, like some people should work with these work.
Yeah, no, there's just no background checks at all, so we don't do any. And I will say what's interesting, what I found, some of the work I did a couple years ago, I worked with the NYC Bar Association, and we did a panel about the legal issues around hiring. And what I found really interesting is background checks are a really actually questionable way to go about employment screening. A lot of employers don't know how to do it well. They don't go through really credible databases. You could just Google somebody and say, oh, I did a background search, and you can't really be sure that the information you found is valid, that it hasn't been expunged the way it should have been. And actually, as an employer, you're more at risk for a discrimination lawsuit incorrectly utilizing a background check or some history you found through whatever means to not allow someone to work for you. You're actually at much greater risk doing that than you are hiring someone and then finding out you had an issue or whatever it might be. So yeah, no, there's absolutely no background checks for us, and I won't be ever. Yes.
So what will happen to a person that was fired by you when he came to open hire?
So when it comes to that, what we try to do is connect them to other services we have. So we try to connect them to our workforce development program, which is a whole separate entity offering people certifications and job hunting services. So we'll try to connect people to the other opportunities in our Mandala, or especially through the new case manager we have with WJCS, we'll try to find other employers in the area. Like, okay, what are you interested? We'll help you job hunt a little, help you find something else. You certainly don't drop off a cliff, I mean, unless it's something incredibly egregious. But generally speaking, we're working with you still going forward.
If someone got fired, is there a way for them to get back on the waiting list?
Yeah, we've actually had a number of people who've been let go for attendance issues who come back around on the waiting list and have been working with us again. So I see a lot of people who have come and gone over the years. Yes?
What's the dynamic between employee to employee? I'm curious to know if one has worked with you for a while, are they as open-minded? Are they open-minded to begin with everyone? How's the culture? Are they like?
It's really case by case. I think you see a lot of togetherness and a lot of I'm here to support you, and I think some of that just comes from the close community relationships people are coming in with. So. Like Dion, for example, has seen a number of people who started as an apprentice who's like, oh, I know this guy, or I used to hang out with this guy, this is a friend of mine. And it kind of builds these natural mentorship relationships. But at the same time, there's definitely been employees who are not thrilled about the hiring model. What's interesting, you'll get employees who are like, I don't want to work next to this guy, I don't know what he did, I don't know where he came from. So you do see some of that tension, but I think we're just constantly trying to reinforce, like, well, that's what the model is. Like, everybody is here through the same process, and we'll work with people case by case if there's certain issues, but it really runs the gamut. It's really case by case. Some people are really open to it right away. Some people, it takes some time for them to warm up to the idea, even coming through the program themselves. But, yes?
Does the other service like early learning center and workforce development community garden, this kind of service, also open to the other people in the community?
Yeah, so actually a lot of the nonprofits primarily serve community members versus bakers. So for the Learning Center in particular, I think it's about 85% of the kids who are there are from the community and not from anywhere in Greyston. So which is really interesting, and I think it's a great opportunity because especially in Yonkers, like, there's not a lot of good quality daycare around. There's a lot of home daycares where that's great and it's cost effective. You don't really know what your kid is doing all day or if they're just sitting in front of a TV all day. And so the Learning Center is a great opportunity for a lot of community folks to find a spot for their kids.
So the job opportunities in this service center, are they also open hiring?
They aren't. So particularly like the Learning Center is another good example. You have to meet some background check criteria and whatnot to work at a child care facility. So that is a program that doesn't give us so much of the opportunity to play with open hiring. But some of the other spots, like workforce development and whatnot, we've definitely moved some people around through the Mandala, and some people who've come in through open hiring, we've given them those opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah, you guys, it seems like you guys are obviously probably the largest in Yonkers, but are there any other like organizations who have the same mission that you have partnered with in the area or in surrounding areas?
Not necessarily the same, maybe breadth that Greyston's doing it, but we definitely partner with organizations in the different spaces who are working on, I guess, different pieces of what we do as well. So like through WJCS, we're connecting with a lot more employers. Workforce development connects us with a lot of employers. Like we have a long-running relationship with Domino Sugar, for instance, who's in Yonkers. They have a huge facility just a mile down the road from us. And we've been in a lot of conversations with them to how can we provide childcare for your employees, and then how can we partner on hiring opportunities as well. And so it's always an interesting fit for us to try to find, okay, what are the relationships that work? What program do they really tie to? How do you kind of tie all those things together? I'm sorry, I keep skipping you.
No, actually, I think my question was asked, but just to go along with the question about who can access the other arms, and so the profits from the bakery fund those areas. Do those other arms ever get overrun because and do the profits and their capabilities ever get unbalanced?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the profits, that's where they give us that flexibility to manage some of the downturns in those nonprofit cycles. I think for anyone who's worked in a nonprofit, grant funding is fickle. Finding your grant funding, sticking to your grant funding is always difficult. The Learning Center always has problems with, Yonkers actually has universal free pre-K, which is a great thing, but then they lose a lot of kids at one part of the year, they gain a bunch of kids later, so they struggle through some financial downtimes, and that's where the bakery profits kind of allow us to get through those hard times with a good cash flow intact so we can support the programs and keep the services up and running. Yes?
When you noted that you have high turnover in your apprenticeship base, my immediate impression is that organizations that share that characteristic tend to also risk developing a reputation in their community based around the fact that they have high turnover. Mm-hmm. And that reputation can swing both ways. Have you had any problems with that, or do you guys have a strong perception of how the community views that aspect of it?
I mean, I think it really varies. Like, I think I've definitely heard some anecdotal of, oh, someone feels that Greyston lets too many people go, or they're not really there to help people. On the flip side, you'll find people who say, oh no, Greyston did A, B, and C, D for me, or I know my family member who did this. I don't know if we've done like really the full assessment to know like what is the community's sense of Greyston. But I do find, again, like once you do get to that full time and we keep people who stay with us for some over a decade, 15 years, 20 years, those people are out in the community as well and kind of sharing their perception too. So I don't know, I haven't seen so much of a negative blowback from that, but.
Well, okay. I guess my impression is that businesses that have high turnover tend to see that as a more expensive way to do business.
Right,
do you
right.
It's just an investment in your model? Or
Yeah.
Really seen it as
No, I think for us what we see is when we're compared to other businesses, a lot of other businesses are putting their time and their resources into that HR screening process. So you're spending a lot of time interviewing, you're spending a lot of time reviewing applications or money on background checks. And even then, at the end of the day, you can't guarantee that person's going to come on and they're going to work out, and you're not going to have to fire them in 2 weeks. So for us, the costs that would be involved in that HR screener kind of move to a training and evaluation model instead. And so we kind of shift the costs where it's not necessarily an imbalance in costs, but a shift in kind of where they're focused.
Whether or not that is an equivalent shift? Or
We've done a case study with Ben & Jerry's to start, and it actually was fairly equivalent, the timing to HR screen versus what we're doing at the bakery. But we're doing definitely some more work around putting the figures around that. But the initial case studies have really shown it's a really comparable cost. Oh. Yes?
Have you had to innovate any other HR practices?
So some of the practices are really around progressive discipline that we've innovated, and that's really to create procedures where, yes, you're looking at someone for time and attendance, yes, you're evaluating those things, but you're creating some space for people to make mistakes, to improve, to change their habits. So with time and attendance for us, like we have this point system I mentioned earlier. Once you get up to 10 points, it's generally a termination, but we really go case by case. Like we see your points start drifting up, HR will call you in, or your supervisor will start to speak to you, or the case manager will start to speak to you. What's going on? What's the obstacle? What's the barrier? Points fall off after a certain few months of employment. Your points reduce. So that model is one that we put into place to really give us the room to evaluate for what we need to, but then also give people the room to improve and grow.
I got time for about 2 more questions.
Have you thought about expanding to other poverty-stricken districts?
We have thought about it. I think right now the business demand doesn't quite call for us to open a new facility, but that's definitely something that's kind of in the back burner, thinking about as the demand grows year over year, where does it make sense to open somewhere else? Yes.
Can I ask the last one then?
Oh, no, sorry, Amanda, go ahead.
Oh, you, Caroline.
Look at that. I mean, it's week 2. They got to kiss up to you a little bit, so, right?
I decided there's room for 2 more questions. Can we talk briefly about what that orientation looks like? So when you were talking about it, I was just thinking of trainings and all these things that people have to sit through oftentimes don't speak to every learning style. What does that orientation look like?
So orientation, we try to mix it up as much as we can. Some of it, I will say, some of it's just boring and tedious. Like learning about food manufacturing is not super sexy. It's, okay, how do you wash your hands properly? How do you make sure your hairnet is on properly and your uniform's on properly? So people get a lot of safety and quality in that orientation. That is a lot of classroom environment. We try to do some role playing and some skits and some videos to keep it a little interactive. But I think what works out best for us is because you are going to work so quickly, you're taking that classroom session and then you're on the floor really rapidly and kind of putting that into practice.
Going back to your initial slide where you mentioned that Bernie had started a Zen Buddhist community. That's like a really specific kind of mindset. And so when you think about that, it's open hiring requires a shift in culture. Like, what else would it take for a company? What other shift would a company need to make to like just get this? Because it seems like there are, if he's Buddhist, there are a lot of steps.
Yeah, we have Buddhism boot camp. I mean, I'll say, I think this is something we've really learned from Ben & Jerry's and their experience taking it on. One thing they ran into really quickly, and they have a similarly tight-knit group at their production facility. St. Albans is not a big place. Waterbury is not a big place. A lot of people know each other. What they found when they brought in their first values-led hires, people just started Googling them. People were like, oh, I don't know that name on the shift. Who's this? And then people started finding, oh, I found your criminal record. Oh, so-and-so did this. I don't want to work with this person. I'm not comfortable with this. What they ran into really quickly is there was a deep-seated bias issue kind of across the company. For as progressive as Ben & Jerry's is or anybody is, there's still people working on your line at the end of the day that bring their own values and mindset into the company. So they've really been engaged in kind of bringing people along around that values conversation. They recently had a big training session for their frontline managers, and we're doing role play around what do you do as a supervisor if you hear someone in the hallway saying, oh, I know so-and-so did this and I don't want to work next to them. How do you address that? How do you handle that? So we're learning from them, because I think for us in some ways we're 30 years into it, so we're like, well, I don't know, you just do it, it's fine, like, works out. Of course we're building like the numbers and the business case, but I think it's been a good learning for us from Ben & Jerry's of, okay, you got to think about what are the biases inherent in your workforce that you need to think about addressing if you're going to open up your hiring in these ways. Okay, that's all. Thank you so much, everyone.